In this video, we're going to be reviewing the Glock 48 for the second time, but we're going to be reviewing the new model of the Glock 48, the Glock 48 Black. Now, just a little history on the Glock 48, and we've got links to the previous videos below, but the lineage of the 48 started with the Glock 43 back in 2015, and then of course the 48 first version came out with, as well as the 43X in 2019. And we did a previous video on the first version of the Glock that came out. Again, we've linked to that below. And we talked about a couple things about it. One is it came out with a stock 10-round magazine. It came with a GMB marksmanship barrel and recessed crown, but it also came out in a two-tone. It came out in a gray slide with an MPVD finish, which some people liked and some people really didn't like, especially if you're a traditionalist and you like Glocks to look all black. We also showed some of the accuracy that I had with the 48, and it was very much on par with the Glock 19, so I didn't really see any differences between the two on accuracy. However, there were two major issues with a lot of people when the Glock 48 first came out. The first thing had to do with the two-tone slide finish. Some people just didn't like the two-tone. They wanted the standard black, and of course it was limited to a 10-round magazine. And this became a significant issue when this pistol came out. The Sig P365. Again, we've reviewed all these below. And it came out built with a high capacity, very small magazine. In fact, it was reported they built the pistol around the magazine. But you'll notice when you look at the width of the magazine, it's almost identical in width to the Glock. So Sig was able to get a lot more rounds in a lot smaller magazine, which in the case in the concealed carry world, even the smallest millimeters of difference in size can have a significant difference as far as carrying capability. And that's what we saw with the 48. So really, Sig disrupted the market heavily with these higher new capacity magazines in these very small frame pistols, which led a lot of people to look at the Glock 43X and the 48 and say, okay, how does this really compare to the Sig? And in many cases, Sig was dominating the market because people just looked at the two and said, you know what, that might just be a better option for me. So when you look, for example, at the Sig, not only is it smaller, but it's higher capacity. It's a shorter slide, shorter frame, and of course with the XL it's a little bit longer, but it's still smaller, as we showed in our previous review, than the Glock 48. And then now Glock has recently come out with the new Glock 48 Black. And one of the major differences you see on the 48 Black here, of course, is like the name denotes, the black slide now has an NDLC finish on it. So it's the diamond-like carbon, that's what that stands for. And it contrasts with the two-tone slide finish that they previously come out with. So clearly they understood that there were enough people out there that wanted this change to happen. But the biggest change that happened didn't actually come out of Glock, but came out of a company that decided to make a magazine to work within the Glock 48 and the 43X, and that's Shield Arms. So Shield Arms came along and said, you know what? We can actually build a magazine similar to what Sig obviously did. In fact, if you look at the dimensions and width, they're almost identical. I believe that they actually took that model and said, you know what, we can build a magazine, a 15-round magazine, that will work in a Glock 43X and a Glock 48. And that's what they did here. And it's called the S15 magazine. So what that basically meant was that a lot of people that either didn't own a Glock 48 or had previously owned a Glock 48 started looking at it and saying, whoa, wait a second. Now it looks correct, and more importantly, it has the same capacity as the Glock 19. So people were starting to look at the difference between the two and say, okay, what does that mean? So when you think about it, the Glock 19 dimensionally is about the same. So a lot of people refer to the Glock 48 as the slimmed down version of the Glock 19, and this is why. When you look at the width of these two pistols, it's significantly different. Now, a lot of people might say, oh, that doesn't look like that big of a difference to me, but it is, especially when you start measuring the two together. So for example, if I look at the frame width on the Glock 19 and compare that to the Glock 48, you can see the significant difference in overall width. And that's what makes this gun so different. And now that it has the same potential capacity as a Glock 19, that really changes the narrative as to, hey, what is this? And is this actually a better option for people than maybe even a Glock 19 now? So when I got the 48, first thing I did was I checked the trigger pull on it with the Lyman gauge. It came in around 6.5 pounds. I also was testing all these S15 magazines, and the one thing I did notice about the S15 magazines were, and by the way, all my pistols have been safety checked, is if you're used to charging your pistol by pushing down on the slide catch, it's easy to do that with a stock magazine, a Glock magazine, but for some reason I really struggle with that with the Shield Arms. Instead, I have to just fully rock the slide with the Shield Arms. But short of that, the performance difference, I haven't seen any other difference other than the fact that it holds more capacity. Now, another great thing about the Glock 48 is size-wise. So one of my favorite size pistols, especially for concealed carry and everything, has always been the 1911 Commander series. And when you look at them side by side, they're very similar, for example, in width. The grip, of course, is a little bit taller. This is a standard size one, but in many respects, it's very similar, including the ergonomics of the grip, which if you like 1911s, you know that one of the great things about the grip on the 1911 is it's narrow enough in the back where if you have regular size hands, the recoil impulse goes back into the meat of the hand instead of into hand, which has been a problem for a lot of the medium to large size Glock pistols where people fire them and it feels uncomfortable because the width of the grip are so large they actually can go in, which is what I talk about in the Glock $4 grip job, which I link to below as a potential remedy to that. But in the case of the Glock 48, the dimensions are very similar to the 1911. So in this case, the recoil impulse is going directly back into the meat of my hand as opposed to in the joint. So this makes it very comfortable, at least for me, and I have average size hands, to fire a Glock 48. As we just showed earlier too, it is also considerably slimmer than the Glock 19. Great ergonomics, comparable to the 1911. If you have larger size hands, however, this actually might be too small for you. And if you really do have large mitts, the Glock 19 just might be a better option for you because that's really where people ergonomically like them the best. But if you have smaller regular size hands, you might actually like the 48 better. Another benefit of the 48 is traditionally when I bought Glocks, I've had to undercut the trigger housing here, which many people would argue the trigger housing is too bulky the way it's designed anyways, and you know that's not that big of a deal. But when you compare that, for example, to the 48, it looks like they did it right. They made it more slender, and there's really no need now for me to undercut this, so that's another benefit I have as well. However, one of the drawbacks is that there's no rail system. So if you're somebody that likes to shoot with lights or lasers attached to your pistol, currently on the 48s, they don't give you that option. So you're probably better off going with the 19 instead. Now, speaking of the 19, let's compare weight. We looked at the dimension sizes, but let's look at the weight with a fully loaded magazine. So in this case, it comes in about 1 pound, 15.5 ounces. And compare that, for example, to now the Glock 48 with a 15 round magazine. It comes in at 1 pound, 11.5 ounces. So basically you're losing about 4 ounces or a quarter of a pound by carrying the 48 over the Glock 19. So not only is the size a little bit bigger, but again, you're shaving off about a quarter of a pound in weight, which again, can be a big difference. As far as upgrades, there's a couple things that I always do on Glocks. I always polish the internal trigger components that are there. You'll also notice on this pistol, I took off the goalpost sights and put on a pair of Trijicon HD HR night sights, which in my opinion are some of the best sights that are out there today, period. In fact, the ability to shoot tighter groups was significantly improved just by these sights alone. Of course, they're designed really for quick target acquisition, and as you can see on the front sight post, which is where you're supposed to focus, it really stands out. So that is a huge upgrade that I would highly suggest if you get a 43X or a 48. Another thing that I did was, and I don't always do these in all my Glocks, but a lot of people will change out the connectors. And what I installed here was I had a 6.5 pound trigger pull originally on the 48 when I got it out of the box. I put in the Ghost Edge connector, and that dropped down to about 4.5 pounds. And not only that, it made the trigger pull much smoother, and my groups got much tighter as well. So if you are doing the 48 or the 43X, I highly suggest putting in a Ghost Edge connector. Those are a couple of the upgrades that I put onto here. So let's talk about value for a minute. Naturally, Glock's the biggest competitor. One of the biggest competitors is of course the Glock 19, but outside of Glock, one of the biggest competitors is the Sig P365XL, which again we've reviewed below and compared the two with the previous version. But I want you to think in the context of value. So at current prices, the Glock 48, if you buy this, it's going to come with standard 2 10-round magazines. Now, again, unless you're in a mag-restricted state, you're probably going to want to buy these S15 magazines. And when you do that, you're also going to have to change out the magazine catch as well, because the magazine catch button is steel. So in this case, if you're putting in a metal magazine, you're going to have a polymer catch in here that's come stock. So what you're going to want to do is get this from Shield Arms, which is the 43 mag catch release, and you're going to want to change this out when you change out the magazines. Otherwise, you can wear away at the polymer catch. And in order to do that, I just want to briefly show you kind of the steps to do it. So in this case, for example, when you look in the pistol down here, and I know it's hard to see that, but there's a spring down here, a mag catch spring that houses this in place. And to better illustrate how this is done, if I'm looking at this comparatively, so you're going to want to work the mag spring away. So right here is the mag spring, and then here is the catch. So what you're going to, or the release. So what you're going to want to do is hold your hands on the side of each side, and you're going to work a small screwdriver in, and you're going to want to bring that magazine catch spring over and then out. And then once you do that, then you can free up the catch release and slide it out the side of the pistol. Then of course you put in the new steel shield arms, and you have to put it in at an angle. So you have to angle it into the pistol, and when you do that, you're going to want to take the mag catch spring and bend it back so that it goes to the back side of the release as it comes in. Then once it's in, you have to push it over and down into that notch again. So that's basically the easiest way to make those changes and to make the upgrade to the magazine catch. So that's one of the other upgrades that you'll want to make when you get these S15 magazines from Shield Arms. In conclusion, when you're looking at the Glock 48, again, if you have small to regular size hands, the Glock 48 is excellent. This might be actually a better option than traditionally the Glock 19, which many people consider to be one of the, if not the best Glocks that are out there. The 48, of course, now with the ability to hold 15 rounds has really changed that narrative, and it provides a really good potential alternative to the Glock 19, especially for all the reasons that I mentioned earlier. Also, if you like the feel and you like the 1911, aesthetically it's very similar in size and feel. So again, that might be something where if you've not liked Glocks in the past because they've been big and blocky, this might be something that really would appeal to you. It certainly did to me. This would not be a good option, however, if you wanted to run lights or you wanted to run lasers on a rail system, because currently Glock doesn't offer that in a 48, so you're probably going to want to either go the route of the Sig or the Glock 19. And if you also want to run standard Glock magazines, so as if you've had Glocks in the past, you know the 19s, the 17s, etc. They've had different length magazines of all different types, but they were always the same width. So if you want the ability to modularly use that magazine, use longer magazines in your Glock 19, you're not going to be able to do that with the Glock 48, because Glock 48 has a different width and a different magazine that only works in the 48 and the 43X. So the Glock 48 has arrived, and it arrived to some degree now based upon some of the changes that Glock made, but more importantly, what Shield Arms did. And when you look at value between the two, the Glock, when you add all these components, you add 2 Shield magazines and you put in the slide catch release and upgrade the sights. Right now, one of the issues I have with Glock, and always have with Glock, is not everybody wants to make these changes to the pistols. In many cases, they want to buy them out of the box ready to go, similar to what Sig does. And the Sig 365XL is really one of the closest competitors to the Glock 48. And when you look at price, so if you have the 48, and then you include, for example, 2 additional magazines. They come with the 10 rounders, but if you have to go out and buy the 2 Shield magazines, the magazine catch, you know, the ghost connector, things of that nature, then you've got about the same amount of money in the 48 as you would a 365XL out of the box, and that's before you even change the sights. And then if you start upgrading the sights, I mean, there's nothing wrong with the goalpost sights. These are just better sights for me. But in this case, by the time you end up upgrading the sights, you've got an extra $100 to $150 more in the Glock 48 than you would by buying the Sig P365XL. And of course, a lot of that is caused by Glock, because Glock didn't innovate with their magazines. They used the old tried and true magazines instead of coming up with something like Sig did and now Shield Arms did that works better for this type of pistol. So at least currently, Glock doesn't have that option, so you have to go out and buy these from Shield Arms. In the perfect world, Glock would ship these out with two options. You could either have two 10-round magazines or two 15-round magazines. And if they did that at current pricing, then you would be on par with the 365XL, at least price-wise when you compare the two. So that's a quick review of the new Glock 48 and some of the features and functionality that come with the pistol. I love it. It's very accurate. I certainly like this better than the first generation 48. And now with these Shield Arms 15-round magazines, it completely changed the equation, where the Glock 48 to me is, at least to me personally, is a better alternative in most cases than the Glock 19. If you like this video or like our channel, please like us on YouTube, and thanks for watching.